Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz, and this season we will be unpacking real trends, hot topics in the workplace around allyship and inclusion. Our goal is that each week you leave with tangible tools, information, practical strategies that you can take back to allies at your organization. Let's dig in to this week's topic. Hey listeners, good to be with you. Wanted to talk about kind of a hot topic that took off in the news cycle and primarily about an article that I wrote for Forbes that cites some research about the problems keeping business leaders up at night. So I had a chance to interview Patrick Wright, who's the department chair of the Darla Moore School of Business, and they conduct at USC, and they conduct a survey of Fortune 500 CHROs, so Chief Human Resource Officers, every year, and they interview CEOs about the challenge they face, and they call the report executive succession. So what they found is what really keeps business leaders up at night is developing a strategic workforce plan. And so this really cites the need for continuing to build out the talent pipeline, certainly the need for succession planning for existing talent. So really that workforce plan is quite a challenge with the labor market. Additionally, influencing the development of business strategy was a priority. And so how do we have a succinct business strategy? How do we plan for the future from a business perspective? And then the last one was the financial impact of HR processes. So if I had to flip these problems that are keeping business leaders up at night, I might consider a few options. So if workforce plans is a challenge, think about inclusive succession planning. Succession planning processes haven't changed that much, and the workforce has changed a lot, especially in the last few decades. So there's, a lot more focus on diversity. There's a lot more focus on inclusion. And we still have this dominant group at the top of organizations that's primarily of, a specific demographic that may not mirror match the front lines or consumer bases. And so the challenge is that we have kind of this affinity bias where we kind of like to be around people like us. And the younger employees continuously, tend to not be of, a race in particular. Multicultural is extremely common for younger folks, different gender identities, ethnicities, abilities, neurodiversity. And so succession planning really needs to mirror the needs of future generations. So think about, historically marginalized groups when you're building out sponsorship programs, when you're building out mentorship programs, when you're considering maybe reverse mentoring programs, and provide tools and resources to help those sponsors, those mentors, those senior leaders connect better with their proteges. Because it can be a little uncomfortable if you've never been around somebody of a very different ethnicity. You may not know how to connect, what to talk about, what to focus on. And so that's an opportunity to learn and grow for senior leaders and help them understand better communication. So just making sure that we're eliminating bias in succession planning processes. Performance management, promotion decisions, pay decisions are riddled with bias. Have objective criteria. Calibrate across the group, right? Really hone in on the behaviors that are going to be important to do that job and focus on those key behaviors rather than kind of when we're left to our own devices. Oh, they're a go-getter. They'll figure it out. Or I play golf with them. They're great, right? Those aren't good reasons to promote people, but let's be honest, we've made a lot of decisions that way based on who we like, who's like us, instead of who's really best for the position. So let's be objective. Let's be clear with succession planning. The other thing, to think about with strategic planning and business planning, DEI is no different. So plans, uncertainty prevails. And so what I might suggest is really getting clear with your business strategy and how does diversity tie into that. So just consider, what does DEI mean at our organization? Why does it matter at our organization? What are the key priorities that will demonstrate our commitment to DEI? And embed that into your strategic plans. They're going to make them more inclusive. They're going to make them more strategic. And they're going to help you be ready for business in the future that inherently will be filled with a much more diverse base in the community just by shifting demographics. And the last piece of this, if you really want to capitalize on the return on investment on human capital development, traditional measures like employee engagement scores don't really help. Performance needs to be assessed beyond employee engagement to consider inclusion. And inclusion is highly correlated with business performance. In fact, psychological safety, a topic I'm really passionate about, we know is the number one attribute of high-performing teams. So this has real, tangible business results, but there's not a lot of great ways that I've seen demonstrated to measure inclusion. So that's why we partner with Qualtrics, which has a 27-question research-backed questions that can be reported out based on dimensions of diversity. So we can slice and dice the data by gender, race, ethnicity, disability, LGBTQ+, and more. And when you break down inclusion perceptions across the dimensions of diversity, there's usually stark differences in perceptions of fairness, that, psychological safety factor, and other factors that are strongly correlated with business performance. So when you get really clear on those behaviors and measure them over time and see how that experience is translating differently for different folks in the workforce, you can really measure that return on investment. Were we able to improve on these inclusion dimensions? What is that worth to our business? So think about the challenges that might keep you up at night, whether it's workforce planning, strategic planning, the return on investment of the work that we're doing to support humans. When you get better at succession planning, when you get better at calculating the ROI based on key leading indicators, when you think about what that experience looks like for strategic planning and the intersection to DEI, you foster a culture of diversity and inclusion where leaders can be better equipped for the future. So hopefully these things don't keep you up at night. And if they do, hopefully there are some remedies that you've found in today's episode. Thanks, listeners. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to the Diversity Pivot podcast. My hope is that you walked away with a tangible tool, insight, or information that you can share with other allies on the journey. If you liked this week's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a tremendous amount to us. We'll be back next week with another hot topic.